Hello, my friend. Welcome to this week's episode of As It Relates to Podcasting. I am your host, Simona, and on this show, we dive into the world of podcasting and talk about all of the aspects that you need to know when it comes to launching, growing, monetizing your show and beyond. Today on this episode, we are going to discuss 5 essential tips to prep your podcast for the holidays or for taking a hiatus. And this is particularly top of mind for me right now, as within my agency, Costantini Productions, and soon to be a different name, which you can stand by for soon. It's particularly important right now because we are currently going through and helping all of our clients get ready for the holidays, get their episodes done and prepared well into January, and with giving my team a 2-week break off at the end of the month. So I'm really excited for you to take some of these strategies and different things that we've been implementing within the agency so that you can also replicate them on your end too. So the first tip that I have for you is to schedule ahead and to batch record. This is all about staying ahead of the game because the holiday season can get really hectic. We don't really have time to be doing the week to week, day-to-day episodes or production or anything like that. So it's really crucial to plan your schedule and plan your episodes in advance. So I want you to consider, if you're like, oh my goodness, Simona, but I just don't have the time to batch record. I want you to consider batch recording different episodes, several episodes in one sitting to give yourself a little bit of a buffer. So if that means that you record your podcast episode, maybe you're doing 2 or 3 episodes in 1.5 or 2 or 3 hour block. That way, you can enjoy your holiday break without worrying about meeting those tight recording deadlines, trying to find guests, trying to find time to edit and produce and all of these different things, create social media content, have your content go out late, be writing captions. Like none of the above happens when you take the time to batch and plan ahead. I want you to also remember there are so many different tools that you can leverage to help you with your production process. So making sure that you're using the scheduling features on all of your hosting platform and social media platforms to help you automate the release of your episodes during your break so you don't have to check in as much. And I want you to also consider creating evergreen content that will remain relevant even if your audience listens to the podcast episode after the holiday season. And like I was mentioning before, you can take said social media content and schedule it all out well in advance so that you can just, turn your computer off, turn your laptop off, turn your phone off, and not have to worry about how is the content going to reach my listener. Okay. So very, very key tip here is to plan ahead and to record ahead. So as this episode goes live, you still have the time. You still have a few weeks before the holidays truly begin. And you can definitely plan some time in there to batch record. Just be intentional with your time. That is the key. The next tip that I have for you is communicating with your audience. You don't want to go on a hiatus or take a break or anything like that without communicating with your audience. Communication is key, especially when it comes to those super loyal listeners like you for this show. I want you to be transparent about your plans for the holiday season, any plans that you have for a break, or if you're going to take a few weeks off or what have you. Share in the excitement for the upcoming season, the upcoming hiatus, and let them know that you're going to be taking a planned short break just to go on a hiatus to recharge and to enjoy and just to be present with family and friends and all of the above. It's really crucial that you communicate with your audience because what happens is listener habits, they will go in and they will see your podcast feed and they're going to see that there's no new episodes and they may think that you've ghosted them. They may think that you may not be putting out new content anymore. They might think that you're done for the year and maybe you're done your podcast overall. So it's really crucial to make sure that you are communicating with your audience at all times, okay? The next thing that I want to talk about is planning your special holiday content. So I think the holidays are a fantastic time to add some extra magic into your episodes, to theme them to some of the different, topics that you're going to be talking about. So my third tip for you today is to create a special holiday themed episode or content that resonates with the season. So for example, Thanksgiving in the US just passed and you could have had an episode, about gratitude or sharing some of the gratitude you have for your audience and your listeners, or compiling some really cool footage from your listener or from your audience about being grateful. For the holidays, you can put together a whole compilation. I'll give you an example on Happiness Happens, which is my other podcast. So at the end of every podcast episode, I ask my guests one tip that they would leave with my listener to create more happiness in their day every day starting today. That is the question that I ask on every single episode. And we have over 200 episodes on that podcast. So what I am going to be doing this year is taking the answer to that question and compiling it as one episode. And I'm going to be adding in different things throughout the conversation, throughout the episode, of what I loved and why I loved those particular things. So you could do something like that too, because that's really, really, really fun. And here's a couple of other ideas for you. You can collaborate with other podcasters, right? And you can create a joint holiday episode. You can bring a fresh perspective to your audience, or you can create, like I was saying with Happiness Happens, a best of compilation or a year in review compilation, or episodes to celebrate the accomplishment and the memorable moments of your podcast. So those are some ways that you can create some newer content and have that content on the feed. So this takes me into my next tip for you. My next way to prep your podcast is curating that best of compilation. So as you're approaching the holiday season, creating this best of compilation, like I was saying, highlights those memorable moments, interviews, or discussions from past episodes that you really, really loved. And not only does it provide your audience with a nostalgic feeling or trip down memory lane, it also introduces new listeners to past content, giving you eyes and ears on past episodes. So you're highlighting those past episodes, you're getting those new subscribers, and you're getting people who are engaged with past content as well. It's a really great way to keep your feed active and engaging during the holiday break, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. And some things that you can include in this are brief intros or reflections before each segment, which is what I was talking about with Happiness Happens. I'm going to be putting in different segments of my own thoughts of what I loved about the podcast episode, or what I loved about the advice that that person shared, or what that guest had to say. This adds a personal touch that really can't be replicated, and people are going to just absolutely love this compilation because they get to see a look back and get a really good feeling for moving forward. And then the other thing that I want to talk about here too is making sure that you're encouraging your audience to share their favorite moments of the best of compilation. And they can do this through social media. You can ask your audience to share with you their favorite parts of your best of compilation. Ask them to share it on social media and tag you. This really creates a beautiful community and dynamic around what you're creating, gets people engaged online, gets people tagging you, gets you active. And this is really great to keep your podcast active even during a podcast hiatus. So I think this is a really great tip. Before we go into the next tip that I have for you, I want to talk a little bit about what happens in terms of the production side of it. So I had mentioned to you before, making sure that you're batch recording. You can also do batch editing, right? So you can also go in and you can edit your podcasts in advance when you have a little bit of extra time and get them done and ready to go. What I like to do is I like to have all the episodes edited until the week after I'm going to be back. So let's say I'm going to be back, for example, within my agency, we're going to be back in the office on January 3rd. So that means I want all of the episodes that are going live that week of January 1st, and maybe even some of the following week, I want those all done and ready to go and edited so that nobody has to worry about it when the time comes. The content is already edited, it's already done. Then what you can do, once you have all of your episodes edited and you've already done you're doing your show notes, hopefully you're doing your show notes at the same time. But as you're doing your show notes, now you have, very minimal time that you have to dedicate towards creating social media content and then scheduling your episodes. So give yourself a deadline for when you want everything to be done for. And then I want you to backtrack and figure out what those specific timelines look like. Okay. Now, that in mind, let's go into my last and final point in this episode today. And this is planning your comeback strategy. Taking a break does not mean that you need to disappear entirely or completely. So my final tip for you is to make sure that you plan your comeback, you plan the episode that you're going to be coming back to after your hiatus, after your break, or after the holidays. And this goes hand in hand with communicating with your audience, right? You want to let your audience know when you're going to be returning, and you want to build that anticipation for your first post-holiday episode. This can be a special welcome back episode. This can be a teaser of all the different content that they can expect in the new year or the upcoming weeks, or something that is really relevant to you in your industry and a way that you want to kick off the new year or your new season, or, just coming back from your hiatus. And so a couple of points that are really important to consider. Make sure that you are teasing your upcoming guests, your upcoming topics, or any changes so that you can keep your audience intrigued during your break. And you want to use those breaks as an opportunity to refresh your podcast branding or make any necessary adjustments based on your listener feedback. Maybe you want to create some new social media graphics or create a whole new social media strategy. When you take care of all of these different pieces, right, and you give yourself the space to not have to worry about the production side of it, then you get to look at your strategy overall and you get to sit down with it and create something, different. Maybe it feels more aligned. Maybe you want to change your direction. You want to change your mind. So I think it's super important to consider that as well, that, it can be a time where you're allowed to go in and make changes and make updates. So let me just recap these tips for you really quick. The first one is to schedule ahead and batch record. The second one is to communicate with your audience. The third one is to plan that special holiday content that goes into tip number 4, which is curating that best of compilation. And number 5, planning your comeback strategy. So let me know how these tips are helpful for you and which one you are going to implement. Tag me on social media. Let me know that you're listening. I love hearing from you so much, and share this with another creator that needs some help getting their podcast all done and organized ahead of the new year. Thank you very much for tuning into today's episode. Be sure to leave a rating or a review of the show where you're listening. And again, tag me on social media so I can see you're listening. I absolutely adore that you are here every single week. It means so much to me. I'm very, very grateful for you and for your time and for learning alongside me here on this podcast. So with that in mind, I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you on next week's episode.